Coco Jones was deep in the middle of a jungle shoot for her new film. The production crew had scattered to different spots, leaving her with a rare moment of silence away from the lights and cameras. The air was heavy, filled with the hum of insects and the distant calls of wild animals. At first it felt peaceful, but that calm began to shift into something else, something unsettling. The trees seemed to close in tighter, shadows stretching longer than they should. What Coco did not realize was that she was no longer alone. The jungle was hiding eyes that watched her every move. She thought she had stepped aside for just a short break, but in reality, she had stepped straight into the sights of people who carried more than just hatred in their hearts. This was not about fame, not about the movie, and not about her career. Out here, miles away from safety, the stakes were survival itself. Something dangerous was building in the silence, and every step Coco took was pulling her closer to it. The jungle was about to reveal a threat she never expected, one that would test not only her strength, but the loyalty of the man sworn to protect her. Coco Jones walked with quiet confidence, her posture steady, even as she moved away from the film crew. She had grown used to the pressures of cameras and the constant presence of people, but here in the jungle, she allowed herself a few minutes of solitude. She breathed in the thick, humid air and tried to enjoy the break, unaware that her decision to step away would place her in real danger. Hidden among the trees, a group of locals had been watching. They were not curious onlookers or harmless villagers. They were a clan bound by prejudice, men who despised outsiders and especially resented the presence of a young, successful black woman on what they believed was their land. For them, Coco represented everything they hated. They had followed her movements quietly, their eyes fixed on her every step, waiting for the right moment to close in. Coco was unarmed and unaware, her guard lowered in the belief that she was only a short distance from safety. What she did not see was the slow, deliberate way the clan was tightening their circle around her, using the thick jungle cover to hide their approach. Meanwhile, her security chief, positioned not far from the set, felt a growing unease. Years of training had taught him to pay attention to instincts, and something in the air was off. The jungle had gone quieter than usual, as if nature itself was warning of danger. He scanned the trees, eyes sharp, reading the subtle signs of movement that most people would overlook. His job was to protect Coco, and though he did not yet see the threat, he could feel it pressing closer. As Coco walked deeper into the trees, the imbalance grew clearer. She was alone, vulnerable, and surrounded by a hostility she could not yet sense, while her protector hurried to piece together the truth before it was too late. The first sound that reached Coco was faint, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. She paused, scanning the jungle, but saw nothing. A few steps later, she caught the crunch of leaves underfoot, quick and deliberate, as if someone was matching her pace from the shadows. Her heart skipped, and instinct told her she was not imagining it. Then came the voices, low at first, mocking, drifting through the trees with cruel amusement. The words were sharp, laced with hatred, spoken by men who clearly believed they owned this place. Their laughter carried arrogance, the kind that came from knowing their target was outnumbered. To them, Coco was not a celebrated artist or even a person to respect. She was prey, cornered in their territory. Coco's confidence held for as long as it could, but the truth was undeniable. The whispers were closer now, the footsteps more deliberate. She turned and saw shadows moving, shapes slipping between the trees to form a ring around her. Her breathing grew heavier, her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain still. Panic would only feed their power. Calm was her only weapon. At the same time, the security chief was already reading the signs of danger. He had noticed that Coco's radio check-in was delayed, an unusual break in her routine. His eyes scanned the ground, finding footprints that didn't belong to the crew. They were fresh, too many of them, and leading in the direction Coco had gone. Even the jungle itself betrayed the truth. The birds were gone, the insects quieter than before, the kind of silence that followed the arrival of predators. His pace quickened. Every step told him time was running out. Somewhere ahead, Coco was walking into a trap, and if he didn't reach her fast enough, the clan would strike first. The whispers ended, replaced by the heavy crunch of boots closing in from every side. One by one, the figures emerged from the shadows until Coco could see them clearly. Men with hard faces and cruel smirks stepped into the clearing, their bodies forming a wall that cut off every path she might take. The circle was complete. The jungle, once her escape, now felt like a cage. The taunts came quickly, sharp and venomous. They threw racial slurs at her, each word meant to belittle and intimidate. Their laughter echoed through the trees, a sound meant to strip away her dignity and remind her she was outnumbered. One of them leaned forward, sneering, as he told her she should not have come here, that people like her had no place in their land. Every insult carried the same message. They wanted her to feel powerless. But Coco stood firm. Her voice did not tremble when she answered, and her eyes never dropped from theirs. She refused to give them the victory of fear. Her defiance was quiet, but it cut through their noise. She was not going to beg, she was not going to break, and that truth unsettled them more than they admitted. Still, the clan believed they had her cornered. With every exit blocked and their numbers overwhelming, they grew bolder, stepping closer, mocking louder, convinced that the jungle itself had handed her to them. They thought the moment belonged to them. Then the sound of another presence shifted everything. Footsteps, steady and deliberate, broke through the tension. The men turned, and into the clearing stepped Coco's security chief. His face carried no panic, no hesitation. His calmness was sharper than any weapon. He said nothing at first, simply letting his presence fill the space. The clan exchanged uneasy glances. They expected fear, maybe even begging, but instead they were met with a silence that was heavier than their threats. The balance had begun to tilt, though they did not realize just how dangerously it was shifting against them. The silence shattered when one of the men lunged forward. That single move ignited the rest, and suddenly the entire group surged toward Coco, their shouts echoing through the jungle. It looked like the end, but before they could close in, the security chief moved. He did not hesitate. Years of training kicked in, and his response was ruthless, efficient, and terrifyingly precise. The first man that reached him was dropped instantly, disarmed and thrown to the ground before he even understood what had happened. Another rushed from the side, swinging a heavy branch, but the chief intercepted with a swift strike that sent him sprawling into the dirt. Every motion was deliberate, controlled, never wasted. The jungle became an arena. The sound of fists connecting, bodies hitting the ground, and sharp cries of pain cut through the still air. Birds scattered overhead as the chaos rippled outward. But inside the clearing, the fight was exact and unrelenting. The clan had numbers, but numbers meant nothing against skill that had been forged through real combat. Coco held her ground, eyes locked on the struggle unfolding around her. She saw the precision in every move, how her protector dismantled one attacker after another without losing his rhythm. He moved like someone who had lived this 100 times before. each strike carrying the weight of experience that none of the clan could match. Panic began to spread among them. The men who had mocked and taunted just minutes earlier now stumbled back, their arrogance cracking under the reality of what they faced. They had thought they were hunting easy prey, but instead they had walked into the path of a man who was more dangerous than any weapon they carried. One by one, the attackers fell or retreated, the circle breaking apart as fear replaced their hatred. The clearing that had once been filled with cruel laughter was now filled with the groans of defeat. The jungle seemed to echo with a different truth, that the clan had chosen the wrong target, and the cost of their mistake was now written in every broken attempt to rise from the ground. The clearing was silent except for the groans of the men sprawled across the ground. The once bold clan now lay defeated, clutching bruises, gasping for air, their earlier arrogance shattered by the brutal efficiency of one man. The security chief stood at the center of it all, steady and composed, as though the chaos had barely touched him. His breathing was even, his posture unshaken, and his presence alone made it clear the fight was over. Coco did not move for a moment. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear of him, but from the shock of how quickly everything had changed. Just minutes earlier she had been surrounded, trapped, with no way out. Now the same men who had laughed at her were broken and silent, afraid to even lift their eyes. She finally lifted her gaze to her protector. Their eyes met, and in that unspoken moment, she understood the depth of his loyalty. He had not just defended her, he had made it clear that no one would ever harm her without facing him first. The crew, who had been searching after noticing Coco's absence, arrived too late to stop the confrontation, but just in time to see the aftermath. They froze as they stepped into the clearing, stunned at the sight before them. Equipment bags dropped to the ground as they tried to process what they were seeing. The clan, once so loud and aggressive, now lay scattered like they had been swept aside by a storm. The men who had mocked her identity and her success were no longer predators, but cowards, cowering in the dirt. Their arrogance had collapsed into fear, replaced by the realization that they had gravely underestimated not just Coco, but the strength of those who stood beside her. Their plan had not just failed, it had exposed their weakness for all to see. Coco straightened her shoulders, her fear replaced with a fierce calm. She was shaken, yes, but she was still standing. The jungle no longer felt like a cage. It felt like the place where the truth had been revealed, a truth that left her enemies humiliated and powerless. Coco stood in the aftermath, her breathing steadying as the weight of what had almost happened sank in. She thought about how quickly the situation had turned, how hate had nearly destroyed everything in just a few moments. The clan had not cared about who she was or what she was there to do. Their only purpose had been to remind her that prejudice could appear anywhere, even in the middle of a film set, even deep inside a jungle. Her security chief stepped closer, his voice low but firm. He reminded her that the jungle was full of dangers, but the worst monsters wore human faces. His words carried the truth she could not ignore. The wild animals, the difficult terrain, none of it had threatened her as much as the men who had chosen hate over humanity. The crew gathered around, shaken by what they had witnessed. They talked in hushed tones about how things needed to change, how protection could never again be taken lightly. Fame could draw attention, but it could not shield anyone from prejudice. If anything, it made the target clearer. They realized the importance of remaining alert, of never assuming safety simply because cameras were rolling. As the clan was forced to retreat, whispers began to spread. Word traveled quickly even in isolation. People spoke of the man who had faced down an entire group and stopped them cold, not with rage, but with the kind of calm that froze enemies in their tracks. His reaction had shifted the outcome completely, leaving a mark that none of them would forget. For Coco, it was more than survival. It was a reminder that strength was not just about standing tall, but about having people willing to stand with you when hate tried to close in. In the silence of the jungle, one truth echoed: hatred only fuels its own downfall. The clan that thought they could corner Coco Jones was left broken by the strength they never expected. But what Coco Jones did the very next day shocked even her security chief, proving that her response to hate would carry weight beyond that moment. Courage backed by discipline will always silence hate, and it will always stand taller than fear. What would you have done if you were in Coco's place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for the next story that will leave you questioning how far courage can go when tested.